The Veldorian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their ships traveled between stars like fish swimming through water. Their cities floated above clouds on worlds too numerous to count. They had brought 12,000 species under their rule, and not once had any of them said no to joining the greatest civilization in existence. When their sensors first detected radio signals coming from a small blue planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy, they felt only mild curiosity. Another primitive species, they thought. Another world eager to receive the gifts of civilization. Ambassador Krell was given the mission because it seemed so simple that anyone could do it. His ship, the Eternal Sovereign, was larger than most human cities. It carried enough firepower to turn planets into dust and enough luxury to make kings weep with envy. When it appeared in Earth's sky, blocking out the sun over half a continent, humanity knew they were no longer alone in the universe. Captain Daniel Hayes was chosen to lead the human delegation. He was 43 years old, with gray starting to show at his temples and lines around his eyes from years of difficult decisions. He had served in 3 wars on Earth and commanded the first human vessel to reach Mars. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. Dr. Lisa Monroe sat beside him in the shuttle that carried them toward the alien vessel. She had spent her entire career studying languages, and now she would attempt to understand beings from another world. Her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the translation data their computers had compiled from intercepted alien broadcast. Commander Jack Porter completed their team. He was younger than Daniel, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His job was to watch, to listen, and to remember everything. If something went wrong, he would be the one to figure out why. The inside of the Veldorian ship took their breath away. The walls seemed to be made of living light. The air smelled of flowers that had never grown on Earth. Gravity felt different, softer somehow, as if the ship itself was trying to make them comfortable. Ambassador Krell waited for them in a chamber so vast that clouds actually formed near the ceiling. He stood 12 feet tall, with blue-green skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. His voice, when he spoke, was translated instantly by devices that floated in the air around them. "Welcome, humans of Earth," Krell said. "You stand at the threshold of a new existence. Everything you have struggled for, everything you have dreamed of, we offer freely." The holographic displays that filled the room showed wonders beyond imagination. Cities where disease did not exist. Ships that could cross the galaxy in days. Machines that could build anything from raw atoms. It was paradise made real. "Join us," Krell continued. "Become a protectorate of the Veldorian Empire. We ask only for modest tribute and recognition of our leadership. In return, you receive all of this." Daniel watched the images play across the walls. He saw human children running through alien gardens. He saw old people made young again by impossible medicine. He saw Earth transformed into a jewel among worlds. Then he looked at Lisa. She had been studying Krell's body language, the subtle movements that the translation devices could not capture. She gave a small shake of her head. "What do you see?" Daniel asked her quietly. "Possession," she whispered. "He doesn't see us as partners. He sees us as property he hasn't collected yet." Daniel turned back to the ambassador. The alien waited with the patience of someone who had never been refused anything in his very long life. "We appreciate your offer," Daniel said. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "The things you show us are truly wonderful, but we must decline." The silence that followed was unlike anything Daniel had ever experienced. It was the silence of a universe holding its breath. Krell's 4 eyes blinked one after another, a slow cascade of confusion. "I do not understand," the ambassador said finally. "Perhaps your translation is faulty. We are offering you everything. The translation is fine, Daniel replied. We understand what you are offering. And we say no. Krell moved closer, his massive form casting a shadow over the human delegation. You are a young species. Perhaps you do not understand your position. You have no ships that can challenge ours. Your weapons are toys compared to what we possess. We could take your world by force, but we choose instead to offer friendship. And we appreciate that choice, Daniel said. But friendship cannot be bought with gifts, no matter how wonderful. It must be earned through respect. And respect means accepting when someone says no. The ambassador stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then he made a sound that the translators rendered as laughter, though it contained no joy. You will change your minds, Krell said. They always do. We will return with better offers, and eventually you will see reason. No species has ever refused us forever. Then we will be the first, Daniel said. The journey back to Earth was quiet. Lisa spent the time reviewing recordings of the meeting, analyzing every word and gesture. Jack wrote detailed reports that would be studied by military planners for years to come. Daniel simply sat and looked out at the stars, wondering if he had just saved his species or doomed them. When they landed, the world was waiting. Every screen on the planet showed their shuttle touching down. Every ear listened for what they would say. The president met them on the tarmac. Well, she asked. What did they want? Everything, Daniel replied. They wanted everything. Our resources, our loyalty, our future. They dressed it up in pretty words and prettier technology, but that's what it came down to. And what did you tell them? Daniel looked up at the sky, where the Valdorian ship still hung like a second moon. It would leave soon, carrying their refusal back to an empire that had never heard the word no. I told them we're not for sale, he said. Not today. Not ever. The president nodded slowly. Then we better start preparing, because they'll be back. And next time, they might not ask so politely. She was right, of course. The Voldorians would return with better offers, with threats, and eventually with weapons. The road ahead would be long and hard and paved with sacrifice. But for this one moment, standing on the soil of their homeworld under an alien shadow, humanity had spoken with one voice. And that voice had said, no doubt, it was the beginning of everything that would follow. 50 years passed like water through cupped hands. The children who had watched the first alien ship block out the sun were now grandparents telling stories to wide-eyed youngsters. Humanity had not wasted the time. Without Valdorian technology, they had been forced to invent their own. The first human faster-than-light ships were ugly things, held together by determination and engineering genius. They broke down constantly and occasionally exploded without warning. But they worked, and that was enough. 17 human colonies now dotted the nearby stars. New Chicago orbited a red dwarf 20 light-years from Earth. Port Darwin clung to a frozen moon that humans had learned to love despite its hostility. Frontier Station hung in the void between systems, a waypoint for ships traveling to the edge of explored space. The Valdorians watched all of this with growing concern. Species were not supposed to develop this quickly. Species were supposed to accept help and become dependent on imperial technology. Humans were doing something that had never been done before, and the Empire did not know how to respond. High Chancellor Zarth decided to handle the matter personally. He was ancient by any standard, having ruled for over 3,000 years. He had seen countless species join the Empire, and he had never failed to bring a world into the fold. His pride would not allow him to die with humanity still free. His fleet of 300 warships entered human space without asking permission. It was a reminder of the power they had been refusing, a shadow falling across everything humanity had built. Captain, Amy Richardson commanded the patrol vessel that made first contact with the fleet. Her ship, the Defiant, was small and fast, designed for scouting rather than fighting. She was 32 years old, born on New Chicago, and had never set foot on Earth. Valdorian Fleet, this is Captain Richardson of the Earth Confederacy vessel Defiant. You have entered human territory without authorization. Please state your intentions. The response came not from a communications officer but from Zorth himself. His image appeared on her screen, massive and ancient, his 4 eyes burning with something between curiosity and contempt. "Little human," he said, "I am High Chancellor Zorth of the Valdorian Empire. I have come to speak with your leaders. You will escort my shuttle to your homeworld." Amy kept her face neutral despite the insult. "I'll need to contact my superiors." "Then do so. I will wait." The message she sent back to Earth traveled faster than light, but the response still took hours to arrive. In that time, Amy watched the Valdorian fleet through her ship's sensors. 300 vessels, each one capable of destroying everything humanity had built. The comparison to her single patrol ship was almost laughable. "You're not afraid," Zorth observed during one of their waiting periods. He had kept the communication channel open, apparently curious about her. "I'm terrified," Amy admitted. "But fear doesn't change what I have to do. And what is that?" "My job. Whatever happens." The Chancellor made a sound that might have been approval. "Your species continues to surprise me." Earth's response finally arrived. Amy was to escort Zorath's shuttle to Geneva, where President Samuel Grant would receive him. The rest of the Valdorian fleet would remain at the edge of the solar system. The journey to Earth took 2 days. Amy spent most of it answering Zorath's endless questions about human society, human culture, human dreams. He seemed genuinely interested, though she could not tell if it was the interest of a scholar or a collector. Geneva had changed since the first contact 50 years ago. The old United Nations building had been expanded into a massive complex that served as the seat of the Earth Confederacy. Flags from all 17 colonies flew alongside the blue marble banner that represented humanity as a whole. President Samuel Grant waited in the main assembly hall. He was an unlikely leader, a former teacher from a small town who had stumbled into politics through a series of accidents and found that he was good at it. His gray hair was thinning, and his glasses were slightly crooked, but his eyes were steady and calm. "Chancellor Zorth," he said as the alien entered. "Welcome to Earth. We've prepared refreshments if you'd like. I did not come here to eat your food, human. I came to end this foolishness once and for all." Samuel nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable statement. "Then please, tell me what you're offering." Zorth's presentation was unlike anything that had come before. He offered complete autonomy within the Empire. No tribute. No military obligations. Complete access to all Valdorian technology with no restrictions. Humans would be free to govern themselves in every way that mattered. "We ask only that you formally align with us," Zorth concluded. A symbolic gesture. Nothing more. Samuel listened to the entire presentation without interrupting. When Zorth finished, he removed his glasses and cleaned them carefully on his sleeve. "May I ask you a question, Chancellor?" Zorth inclined his great head. "In 10,000 years, how many species have refused you?" "None, until your people." "And how many of those species still exist as distinct cultures? How many of them retain their identity after joining you?" Zorth was silent. The question touched on something the Valdorians rarely discussed, a truth that lived in the shadows of their great civilization. "Things would be different with you," Zorth said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," Samuel agreed, "but we're not willing to take that chance." "Your offer is generous, Chancellor. Perhaps the most generous offer any species has ever received. And I mean no disrespect when I say this." "Say what?" No. The word hung in the air between them. Zorath's 4 eyes studied the small human who had just refused the ruler of the galaxy. You understand what this means, Zorath said quietly. We have been patient. We have been generous. But there are limits to our patience and our generosity. I understand. And you still refuse? We still refuse. Zorath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with something that might have been sorrow. You are a remarkable species, he said. I do not understand you. I do not think I ever will. But I cannot deny that you are remarkable. Thank you. It was not entirely a compliment. The Chancellor turned toward the door. We will not ask again. President Grant, the next time Valdorian ships enter your space, they will not come to talk. Samuel watched him go. When the alien had disappeared, Amy Richardson stepped out from her position by the wall. Do you think he meant it? She asked. Yes, Samuel replied. I think he did. Then we need to prepare. The president looked out the window at the sky where Valdorian ships waited. War was coming. Everyone knew it. But humanity had made its choice, and there was no taking it back. We've been preparing for 50 years, he said. Now we find out if it was enough. The news of humanity's refusal spread through the Valdorian Empire like a disease. For the first time in living memory, the High Council gathered not to celebrate a new conquest, but to understand a failure. They sat in their ancient chamber, surrounded by the flags of 12,000 subjugated worlds, and tried to make sense of what had happened. Perhaps they misunderstood, suggested Counselor Veth. These humans are primitive. Their brains may not process complex ideas properly. Their brains process ideas well enough to split atoms and walk on their moon, replied High Chancellor Zorath. No, they understood. They simply refused. The council debated for weeks. Some wanted to crush Earth immediately, to make an example that would discourage other species from similar defiance. Others argued for patience, believing that better terms would eventually bring the humans around. In the end, patience won, but only barely. 10 years after the first contact, a second Valdorian delegation arrived in human space. This time they came with an offer so generous that the council was certain it could not be refused. Secretary General Maria Santos led the human team. She was 61 years old, a former teacher who had entered politics because she believed in doing what was right rather than what was easy. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and her eyes were sharp with intelligence. Admiral Chris Blake accompanied her as military advisor. He was a large man with hands that had never lost their calluses from years of manual labor before he joined the Navy. He spoke rarely, but listened carefully to everything. Dr. Nathan Cole completed the group. He had spent 20 years studying Valdorian politics, learning everything he could about the empire that wanted to absorb his species. He knew more about their government than most Valdorians did. The meeting took place on a space station that both sides had built together. It floated at the midpoint between Earth and the nearest Valdorian outpost, a symbol of the tentative relationship between the two civilizations. Ambassador Thesara represented the Empire. She was different from Krell in almost every way. Where he had been arrogant and condescending, she seemed genuinely curious about humanity. Her voice carried warmth that felt almost sincere. We have listened to your concerns, Thesara began. We understand that you fear losing your identity, your independence. So we come with a new proposal. The holographic displays activated, but this time they showed something different. Instead of paradise being given to humanity, they showed humans building paradise alongside Valdorians. Equal partners working together. Full citizenship, Thesara announced. Not protectorate status. Every human would have the same rights as any Valdorian. You would have seats in our Senate. Your leaders would help shape imperial policy. Your culture would be protected by law. Maria listened carefully. She asked questions about voting rights, economic integration, military obligations, and cultural preservation. The Zara answered everything with apparent honesty. The offer really was remarkably generous. May I have a moment to consult with my team? Maria asked. Of course. The three humans moved to a private alcove. Through the transparent walls, they could see the Zara waiting with perfect patience. It's better than anything they've ever offered anyone, Nathan said. I've studied their records. No species has received terms this favorable. Which makes me wonder why, Chris replied. What do they get out of it? Maria turned to Nathan. Tell me about the species that joined them willingly. The ones who were treated best. Where are they now? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Gone, he said finally. Not destroyed. Just absorbed. Their languages are museum pieces. Their customs are performed by Valdorians as entertainment. Their genetics are so mixed with the general population that you can't tell them apart anymore. How long did it take? The fastest was 300 years. The slowest was about 2,000. Maria nodded slowly. So the offer isn't to join them. It's to become them. Eventually, yes. She looked out at the stars beyond the station's walls. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning around its sun, carrying billions of people who were counting on her to make the right choice. We go back, she said. And we say no. Chris and Nathan both nodded. They had expected nothing else. When they returned to the main chamber, the Zara's expression was hopeful. She had clearly expected this conversation to end differently than the last one. Your offer is generous, Maria said. More generous than we probably deserve. And we mean no disrespect to your people or your achievements. But, the Zara asked, her hope fading. But Earth must chart its own course. We have to make our own mistakes and find our own victories. We have to be ourselves, whatever that turns out to mean. So we decline. The Zara stood perfectly still. Her four eyes did not blink. You refuse equality with the greatest civilization in the galaxy? We refuse to give up our future in exchange for comfort, Maria replied. It's nothing personal. It's just who we are. The ambassador was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft with something that might have been sadness. I have studied your species, she said. Your history, your art, your wars, and your dreams. I thought I understood you. But this refusal makes no sense to me. You choose hardship over ease. You choose danger over safety. You choose uncertainty over guarantee. Yes, Maria agreed. We do. Why? Maria thought about the question. It deserved a real answer, not a diplomatic evasion. Because hardship teaches us who we are, she said finally. Because danger forces us to grow. Because uncertainty is the price of freedom, and freedom is the one thing we will never sell. The Zara bowed her head. I will carry your words to the High Council. They will not understand them. But perhaps someday someone will. The station was quiet after the Valdorians departed. Maria stood at a window, watching their ship grow smaller against the endless black dot. Chris moved to stand beside her. They won't stop, he said. This was their best offer. The next one will come with threats. I know. We should prepare. We will. Nathan joined them, datapad in hand. I've been analyzing their fleet movements. They're starting to position ships closer to our territory. Nothing aggressive yet, but the capability is there. Maria turned to face both men. Then we have work to do. We need to build our own fleet. We need to find allies among the other species who might be tired of Valdorian rule. We need to become strong enough that the next conversation doesn't end with their ships in our sky. That could take generations. Chris pointed out. Then we better get started. She looked once more at the stars. Somewhere out there, an empire was trying to decide what to do with a species that refused to be collected. Whatever they chose, humanity would be ready, or they would die trying. Either way, they would do it as themselves. The war began without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. Valdorian ships appeared in the skies above 7 human colonies simultaneously, their weapons already charging. The message they broadcast was simple: surrender or die. Not a single colony surrendered. On New Boston, the oldest and largest of the outer settlements, Mayor Helen Park was drinking coffee when the alerts began screaming. She was 67 years old, had built this colony from nothing, and had absolutely no intention of handing it over to anyone. How many ships? She asked her defense coordinator. 47. All heavy cruisers. And we have 12 patrol vessels and the orbital defense platforms. Helen set down her coffee cup. Then we better make every shot count. The battle for New Boston lasted 3 months. Helen organized the civilian population into resistance cells. When the Valdorians landed troops, they found every building booby-trapped, every street a potential ambush. For every human that fell, they made the Empire pay in blood. At night, Helen broadcast messages to her people. Her voice, calm and steady, became a symbol of defiance that spread far beyond her single world. They think we're afraid, she said in one famous transmission. And they're right. We are afraid. But fear doesn't mean surrender. Fear means you understand what you're fighting for. Hold on, my friends. Help is coming. Above Mars, Chief Engineer Carlos Reyes faced an impossible choice. The orbital stations that circled the red planet contained power reactors that could supply energy to millions of people. They also contained enough explosive potential to destroy a small fleet. Valdorian ships surrounded the stations, demanding surrender. Carlos looked at his crew, people he had worked with for decades, and saw no fear in their eyes, only determination. They want our stations intact, he said. That's why they haven't destroyed us yet. They want to use our technology against our own people. What do we do? Asked his second-in-command, a young woman named Rosa Gutierrez. Carlos began working at his console. We make sure they can't have them. Everyone to the escape pods. I'm setting the reactors to overload. You'll die. Maybe, maybe not. But they won't get these stations. The explosion that followed was visible from Earth. 7 Valdorian cruisers were destroyed instantly. 14 more were damaged beyond repair. Carlos Reyes was never found, but his name was carved into monuments on every human world. In the asteroid belt, the war took a different form. Captain Joe Sullivan commanded a fleet that existed only on paper. His ships were mining vessels retrofitted with weapons. His crew were prospectors, merchants, and anyone else who had found their way to the rocks between Mars and Jupiter. We can't fight them head-on, Joe told his captains in a secret meeting on a nameless asteroid. So we won't. We hit them where they don't expect. We vanish before they can respond. We make them afraid to travel through our territory. The guerrilla campaign that followed tied up entire Valdorian battle groups. Convoys were ambushed. Supply depots were destroyed. Commanders who strayed from their fleets disappeared and were never seen again. Joe became a legend among his enemies. The Valdorians called him the Ghost of the Belt and assigned 300 ships just to hunt him down. They never found him. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening within the Empire itself. Species that had been absorbed centuries ago watched humanity struggle with growing fascination. These were peoples who had forgotten what resistance looked like, who had accepted Valdorian rule as the natural order of things. Now they remembered. Underground, movements formed on a dozen worlds. Sabotage incidents multiplied. Communications were disrupted. Supplies went missing. The Empire, which had never faced internal rebellion, suddenly found itself fighting on 2 fronts. Lieutenant Commander Ben Torres served on the frontier, commanding a patrol vessel that monitored the border between human and Voldorian space. He was 28 years old, born on a space station, and had spent his entire life preparing for this war. His crew was small but dedicated. Katie Shaw flew the ship with an instinct that computers could never match. Derek Kim managed their weapons with cold precision. Rosa Martinez kept them connected to the rest of humanity through encrypted channels that the Voldorians could never crack. When a Voldorian squadron crossed into human territory, Ben was the first to respond. 12 enemy cruisers against his single patrol vessel. The math was simple and brutal. "They're hailing us," Rosa reported. "Put it through." The Voldorian commander appeared on screen. "Human vessel, stand down and prepare to be boarded. Your government has been dissolved. Your species is now under Imperial protection." Ben almost laughed. "Our government is fine, actually. You might want to check your intelligence. Surrender now, and you will be treated fairly. We've heard your version of fair treatment. We'll pass." The Voldorian commander's eyes narrowed. "Then you will be destroyed. Maybe, but we'll make you work for it." Ben cut the transmission and turned to his crew. "Katie, get us moving. Derek, target their lead ship. Rosa, make sure you're recording everything and transmitting it back to command. What's the plan?" Katie asked as she powered up the engines. "We buy time. We gather intelligence. And if we're going to die, we take as many of them with us as possible." The battle lasted 11 minutes. Ben's ship was faster and more maneuverable than the Voldorian cruisers, and he used every advantage to stay alive. His weapons were weaker, but Derek placed every shot perfectly. Targeting sensors, engines, communications arrays. They destroyed one cruiser and crippled 2 others before a lucky shot took out their main engine. As the ship began to drift, Ben ordered his crew to the escape pods. "You too, Captain," Rosa said. "I need to make sure the transmission gets through. Go." They went, trusting him to follow. He stayed at his post, ensuring that every piece of tactical data was sent back to human command. Information about Voldorian formations, weapon frequencies, shield weaknesses. The last thing he transmitted was a message for his mother back on Earth. "Don't be sad. I chose this. I'd choose it again." 3 of the 12 Voldorian cruisers never made it home. Across human space, the message spread. Ben Torres had stood alone against overwhelming odds and had made them pay. If one small ship could do that much damage, imagine what humanity could accomplish together. The war was far from over. Billions would die before it ended. Worlds would burn. Families would be torn apart. But with every battle, with every sacrifice, humanity proved that they could not be conquered. The Voldorians had expected a quick victory. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a conflict that grew more costly with each passing day. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Ghost of the Belt was planning his next attack. 4 years of war had changed everything. The Voldorian Empire, which had never known defeat, was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. Their losses were not catastrophic by Imperial standards, but they were shocking. No one had expected humans to fight this hard or this well. Admiral Grace Chun commanded what remained of humanity's combined fleet. She was 63 years old, with white hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death. 2 of her sons had died in the war. Her husband had been killed when their homeworld was bombed. She had nothing left except duty and the people who depended on her. The final battle would take place above Earth itself. It had to. The Voldorians had pushed humanity back, system by system, until only the homeworld remained free. If Earth fell, everything was lost. Grace studied the tactical display in her command center aboard the carrier Independence. 800 Voldorian warships were approaching. She had just over 200 to oppose them. "It's not enough," said her aide, Commander Paul Foster. "Even with everything we've learned, even with all our tricks, we can't beat those numbers." "Maybe not," Grace agreed. "But we're going to try anyway." The human fleet arranged itself in a defensive formation around Earth. Behind them, the planet hung blue and green and beautiful, home to 10 billion people who were counting on these ships to save them. Grace opened a channel to all vessels. Her voice, carried across thousands of miles of empty space, was steady and calm. "Today we show them what freedom costs," she said, "and what it's worth. Some of us won't survive this battle. Maybe none of us will. But as long as we fight, humanity lives. As long as one ship remains, one human draws breath, we are not beaten." She paused, looking at the images of her captains on the communication screens. Young and old, men and women, people from Earth and every colony world. All of them ready to die. "Give them everything you have," she continued. "Make them remember this day forever. And if we fall, fall knowing that you did your duty. That's all anyone can ask." The battle began at dawn, Earth time. The Voldorian fleet advanced in perfect formation, confident in their numbers and their technology. They had won every major engagement of the war. They expected to win this one too. They were wrong. Grace had spent 4 years learning how the Voldorians fought. She knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their blind spots. More importantly, she knew that they had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything. The first wave of human ships were piloted by volunteers who knew they would not return. They flew directly into the Voldorian formation and detonated their reactors on impact. 40 human vessels were destroyed instantly. So were nearly 100 Voldorian ships. The explosion created chaos in the enemy fleet. Grace seized the moment, sending her remaining forces through the gaps in their formation. Human ships, smaller and faster than their opponents, darted between the massive Voldorian cruisers, targeting vulnerable systems with surgical precision. High Chancellor Zorath watched from his flagship at the rear of the fleet. He had seen many battles in his long life, but nothing like this. The humans fought with a fury that bordered on madness. "They're sacrificing themselves," his aide observed. "They're trading their lives for our ships." "Yes," Zorath replied quietly. "They are. Why? They could surrender. They could save themselves." Zorath did not answer. He was beginning to understand something about humans that he had never grasped before. For them, there were things worse than death. Surrender was one of them. The battle raged for 18 hours. The space around Earth became a graveyard of burning ships and floating debris. Human vessels fell by the dozens, but for every one that died, Voldorian ships died with it. And then something unexpected happened. Signals began coming in from across the galaxy. Other species, watching the battle through hidden sensors, had finally decided to act. Fleets that had been hidden for centuries emerged from the shadows. Rebellions that had been crushed rose again. The message was the same from 100 different worlds. "We stand with humanity." Ships began arriving in Earth's system. They were not human ships. They were vessels from species that had been absorbed by the Empire long ago. Species that had forgotten how to fight until they watched humanity refuse to surrender. The Voldorian fleet, suddenly facing enemies on all sides, began to break apart. Captains who had never known defeat found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for millennia burned in the darkness above Earth. Zorath watched it all unfold from his flagship. His commanders were screaming for orders, but he had none to give. The empire he had spent 3,000 years building was crumbling before his eyes. "They would rather die than join us," he said softly. "They would rather cease to exist than become something other than themselves." His aide looked at him with confusion. "Chancellor? That's why they refused us. Every time, that's why. They knew that joining us was a different kind of death." Slower, perhaps. More comfortable. But still death. He shook his great head slowly. They chose to face destruction on their feet, rather than accept absorption on their knees. The Voldorian flagship turned away from Earth. One by one, the surviving Imperial ships followed. The greatest military force the galaxy had ever known was retreating, beaten by a species that should have been conquered in a single day. Grace Chen watched them go. Around her, the crew of the Independence was cheering, crying, embracing each other. They had won. Against all odds, against every prediction, they had won. But Grace did not cheer. She was thinking of everyone who had died to reach this moment. Her sons, her husband, millions of humans across 17 worlds. They had paid for this victory in blood, and she would carry that weight forever. Admiral? Paul asked gently. Are you all right? No, she admitted. But I will be, someday. On the surface of Earth, people emerged from shelters and looked up at the sky. They saw the fires of destroyed ships fading and the lights of friendly vessels taking their place. They saw freedom, purchased at a terrible price, but real nonetheless. 10 years later, the galaxy looked completely different. The Voldorian Empire had fractured into a dozen smaller nations. Species that had been absorbed for millennia were rediscovering their identities. A new order was being built, one based on choice rather than conquest. President Marcus Riley addressed the first Galactic Assembly. Representatives from 100 free worlds gathered to create something new. They offered us paradise, he said. They offered us technology, wealth, protection, and power. And we said no. Not because we didn't want those things, but because we understood what we would lose by accepting them. He looked out at the assembled delegates. Beings of every shape and size and color. Identity isn't something you can preserve in a museum. It's something you live every day, through struggle and choice and sacrifice. The Voldorians never understood that. They thought they were offering us a gift, when they were really asking us to give up everything that made us who we are. In the audience, former High Chancellor Zorath listened quietly. He had been deposed by his own people and now lived in exile, studying the species that had changed everything. He still did not fully understand humans, but he had learned to respect them. And perhaps, in time, he might learn from them. The galaxy was no longer ruled by a single power. It was messy and complicated and sometimes dangerous. But it was free. And humanity had made it that way by doing the simplest and hardest thing imaginable. They had said no, and they had never stopped saying it until the entire universe heard them.